Ryan, I just don't get it. Why do I keep losing cEDH games?
Because you suck at this game. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Playing with Power podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things cEDH, EDH, and Magic the Gathering. I'm your host, Ryan.
And I'm your host, Callahan. And today we are going to be talking about why you might be losing cEDH games and what you can change to win more of them. But first, as always, we're going to go ahead and pay the bills. Tickets for our latest Mox Masters tournament are on sale now. Compete for $2,000 in prizes and points towards our Invitational coming this October. Tickets sell out for each event, so pick up yours today. We have merchandise available in our store. We have Playing with Power logo dice and lightweight coins and more all available. Going to playingwithpowermtg.com today and help support the channel. Speaking of how you can support the channel, you can also check us out on Patreon. Patrons get access to our Discord, webcam league, early access to videos, names in the credits of our show, exclusive videos, the opportunity to watch our gameplay recordings live, and even the ability to be on an episode. There are tiers for everyone, so go to patreon.com/playingwithpowermtg and help support the show. Also, if you're looking to sponsor the podcast, please reach out to Ryan's email. The podcast description, the podcast notes, the YouTube description. You know where to find it.
All that good stuff.
All of the places, maybe even our Twitter bio on twitter.com/pwpmtg. It says business inquiries, Ryan at playingwithpowermtg.com.
I'll just put it out there for the whole world. You didn't even make them look for it.
I know. My bad.
Every single episode, we do a Patreon shout out, and today's Patreon shout out goes to Preston Alfred. Thank you, Preston.
Thank you, Preston. We appreciate you.
Appreciate you a lot.
So, all right. Why do I keep losing cEDH games? A question many of us, I'm sure, happen to ask ourselves. And we, on this episode of the podcast, have decided to compile a few of the different things that we consistently see people, I don't want to say mess up, but maybe forget, or things that they could do better and whatnot. And we wanted to talk about some of those things today to help you win more cEDH games. Ryan, what do you see people missing that's causing them to lose cEDH games?
The first thing we want to do before we dive into each of the topics is there is one little overarching topic that we're just going to brush on really, really quickly. And that is not playing enough games. You have to get skilled at the game. And this applies to all formats. This is not cEDH inclusive. This is agnostic of this format. It's all formats across this entire game. Playing more games of Magic will make you a better player.
And I'll double caveat that, Ryan. I think it's purposefully playing more games of Magic the Gathering will make you a better player. If you're just sitting around and jamming casually and whatnot, that probably won't help you improve much. But if you're playing games with the intention of learning what you're doing wrong and what you could be doing better, you will be shocked how much better your games start going for you, if that is your focus.
Yeah, so starting with that above all else, and then making sure that you're kind of looking for these little signals that we're talking about throughout this episode, I think will help you a lot. We didn't want to go deep into that particular topic. We just wanted to say that kind of as a beginning part to say, look, being purposeful and actually playing more games is going to just make you better, so long as you're picking up these signals. And once you start doing that, now taking these points that we're going to be talking about today, you can actually start to look for those a little bit more, and then purposefully trying to overcome those, or try to, make sure that you're reducing the amount of times that you're falling into these traps, if you will. So let's start off with our first topic, which is not relying on your opponents, which is an interesting topic. Basically, what we're trying to say here is that you, in a 4-player free-for-all game, a lot of times people that are new to cEDH will think that they're on an island. They are truly embracing the free-for-all thing.
Them against the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, there are many times throughout a game where you can have allies. That could be in a turn of a game when someone's trying to win, or even breaking down to phases in a game. Hey, during this main phase of this player, you are 100% needing to buddy up with your other opponents to forge a temporary alliance to stop this person trying to win. And then they move to their end step and you're like, yeah, I'm going to try to go ahead and tutor to find a win myself. And so those alliances get broken.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. I know that you mentioned this in an episode of the podcast a long time ago, and it's kind of stuck in my head ever since, which is that, like, yeah, depending on that's one of the complicated things about CDH is depending on the game, from turn to turn, from phase to phase, from game action to game action, like who is and isn't your enemy and like who is and isn't your ally swaps and just like that, boom, boom, boom. At any point in the game, you might suddenly somebody who was like your number one threat in your mind might be the person who you like have to rely on or maybe even help to not lose the game on the spot.
Mhm.
So I think that's definitely one of the things to look out for. And it's one of those things that it's hard to pick up on too. How much should you be relying on your opponents? How much should you be believing your opponents when they're saying things to you? There's a lot of times when people might you think they're politicking, but they're just saying something that's true, trying to get your attention about something, right? Hey, pay attention to this thing. Oh, all right, buddy. Well, they were just telling you the truth, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe they were trying to pull over something on you. So um, relying on your opponents is definitely an integral part of the game.
100%.
Using your opponents as allies is a very integral part of the game. And I think a lot of people who go into these scenarios, like you said, where they're like, oh, it's a free-for-all, it's a free-for-all, every man for himself, I'm here all alone, I have to look out for number one, me, and nobody else. That's a philosophy that I believe can only take you so far, because there are three other players at the table who do have pretty much just as much agency on the outcome of the game as you do. And if you can leverage that to your advantage, if you can rely on your opponent sometimes to have the interaction or to be able to stop somebody else or to not always have it, even in regards to winning the game, even if they're looking threatening, that can up your win percent a decent amount.
Yes, it can. And, some cues to kind of look for this to see whether or not this is happening too much. If you find yourself in scenarios where an opponent is telling you, hey, we need to stop this, take a second, pause, think about what it is that they're trying to stop. Because let's say somebody is vampiric tutoring on an end step and it's turn one of the game. And it's about to be that.
How much do you care about a mana crypt or a Rhystic Study resolving?
Like,
it's the question you have to ask yourself.
You need to stop that. All that opponent is trying to do is trying to politic you, because it's going to stop their tutor and your interaction. So they are way ahead on advantage. Yep. Whereas if there's an Underworld Breach on the stack, they're not trying to politic you anymore. We have to isn't over.
Yeah.
So really try to make sure that they're not trying to politic you. And politics is a whole other episode. It's a whole other topic. But those types of things you want to start to look for to kind of see whether or not you're saying, am I losing games because I'm just not trying to lean into my opponent's resources too much? Am I trying to do it all myself? And then you get upset because you say, oh, gosh darn it, I got 3-for-1 again. That's probably because you're not relying on your opponents enough. If you say a lot of times, oh, it was arch enemy, oh, I got 3-for-1 too many times, that's a good cue for you to kind of take a step back and kind of think about this point that we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of the inverse here too, which can be like something that is probably making you lose some cEDH games is if you are relying on your opponents too much. There are time and time again, I've experienced this a lot, especially back when I was playing a lot of like control decks. Kind of one of the problems of playing control decks in cEDH is that people have this tendency to rely on their opponents too much. They're like, oh, this guy's had a Rhystic Study go in for a turn cycle. He's got 3 counter spells. We're fine. I'm going to greed out. And then like the next person just win the game. And you look at the Rhystic Study player, you're like, bro, you were supposed to have it. They're like, I drew 4 lands. I told you that. Why didn't you believe me?
I drew 2 lands and an Arbor Elf. What was I supposed to have?
Yep. Exactly. So that's something you kind of have to watch out for too. Just like you cannot rely on your opponents enough, whether it be casting your interaction when they could instead, or not believing them at the right time or whatever. It's very possible too to lose games to going too far in the opposite direction, which is just always thinking your opponents have your best interests in mind. Always thinking that your opponents are going to have the interaction when you don't. Always thinking that your opponents are going to like not greed out themselves, because that's like something you have to hedge against too. If you're thinking that an opponent, you develop your board a whole ton thinking that the next opponent is going to have to like keep up interaction or something. So we don't lose the game to the guy with exposed win in hand or whatever, and then they greed out too because you have a force of will, I guess. You're going to lose a lot of games to that too. If that even makes sense, Ryan. I don't. Are you picking up what I'm putting down, Ryan?
Totally picking up what you're putting down. Nice statement. I love that statement.
Thank you.
I use it way too much.
I probably started saying it because of you.
Rubbing off on you.
It's only been nearly 3 years now or
something like that. That sounds about right. I love this topic here because of the first topic. So what we're talking about the inverse, which is relying on your opponents too much. And the reason that we put this immediately afterwards is because when we say the first topic, oh, you're not relying on your opponents enough, people's instant reaction is to just become the sandbag master and just never interact at all, saying, well, I need to rely on my opponents more. And they're doing the rubber band thing where they're like, oh, I don't do it enough. And then they do it way too much. And it's the happy medium that we're talking about here. That's kind of why we brought up the examples in the last topic. It's why we're talking about this right now. Just because you are not next, you're not last in priority order or whatever, it doesn't mean you constantly sandbag and constantly pass priority or start to do the thing that we've talked about in previous episodes where it starts to get into mana bullying and forcing interact. Oh, I need you to activate Thrasios. And we had a Mox Masters where this kind of stuff happened. That's where you kind of, like I said, you rubber band and you snap too far in the other direction and think that you should never interact and everyone else should always have it. You will lose games by constantly relying on your opponents without full information of what those opponents have. You don't have a telepathy on the battlefield. You can't see what's in their hand. And so you might lose games simply because you're thinking that I'll just sandbag everything and everyone else will interact for me.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, these are the kind of things that are kind of hard to learn. Like, it's very intuition based, and kind of like we said at the top of the show, some of these more intuitive things you can kind of only pick up on by purposefully playing more games. I think if you sat down and you said, all right, I'm going to try to play X amount of cEDH games in the next 2 weeks, and I'm going to specifically focus on trying to find the right balance of relying on myself and relying on my opponents in these games, I want to focus on how my opponents act when they're kind of BSing, how my opponents act when they are being more serious about stuff, how different decks or maybe even archetypes of cEDH decks will act in different scenarios. There are some decks that you're going up against, even if there's blue in them, they have 4 free counter spells and they will just have to play out to the board every single turn because that's all their deck does. So you'll never be able to rely on them for interaction and that kind of stuff. So I would encourage you to just take a block of time and purposefully play games with people and say, all right, this time these games I'm playing, I'm not even trying to win, right? Maybe say, obviously you should be trying to win, but this game, I'm going to be putting all of my focus on much as possible as trying to figure out this relying versus not relying on my opponents, seeing how that changes the texture of the game, seeing how that does for me. And I think you will see some great results.
Yep. So the key moments and the things you should be looking out for while you're doing this, just like we talked about not relying, now you're relying on your opponents too much. Find yourself in a position where you're saying, why am I not using this in my hand right now? If you have a piece of interaction, you need to deliberately and purposefully say, why would I not use this? And if you can start to say those things, that's when you can start picking up on things. Oh, I have a swan song in my hands. Why would I not use this right now? If it's something like just a silly little enchantment or something like that, there's no big deal. Or if it's just trying to counter a tutor, maybe that's a time when you want to rely on your opponents. But if there's like we said earlier, there's an Underworld Breach on their stack and there's a swan song in your hand, you might say, why am I not using this right now? Do we know that there's revealed information, or am I just relying on my opponents too much here and I might just throw this game and lose this game because of it?
Yeah. I kind of actually boomed myself yesterday. We were doing a good old Mox Pro recording. I was playing Ob Nixilis, something. Check out the episode about why it's my favorite cEDH deck right now. A link in the link in the recommended on YouTube probably right now.
Something like that. Yep.
But and I thought to myself, all right, I know that 2 of my opponents are basically have win on board, but I know Alana has a tutor that could go and get a silence, and Alana also has a ranger captain on board, and our other opponent also has a ranger captain on board. So like there's a lot of stuff going on here. I can't win this turn. I would have been in the position to win pretty easily if two of my opponents didn't have protection from everything from the one ring at that exact moment.
That sucks.
So I had to figure out how to like set myself up for success on my next turn, and I said, okay, I like cast, I think, Demonic Tutor. I was freely looking through my library. It was a Wishclaw Talisman, and I said, all right, activating my Wishclaw Talisman this turn is like what I can do. I'm going to give it to the guy who definitely can't win. And I'm just going to go and I'm going to set myself up for next turn. And like, realistically, I think like the best decision off of that might have just been like to get some kind of interactive spell, like a creature kill spell, because I was playing against a bunch of like creature matters decks or something like that. But instead I got Ad Nauseam. And the kicker is Ad Nauseam would probably be perfectly fine for me to get if I had been left with any mana after resolving my Ad Nauseam. But so it was just like super Greedville. I was like, all right, we're going to get around. Nobody's going to win. I'm going to cast this Ad Nauseam on Alana's end step. We're going to be great. I lost that game, Ryan. Let me tell you. I relied on my opponents too much.
Yep. And this is not some hard and fast concrete rule that's always going to apply. It always matters on the context and the texture of the game. But like we said earlier, playing more games will help you figure those out.
Yep, exactly, Ryan. And kind of in the vein of playing more games always helping you. Our next thing that we have here, why do you keep losing cEDH games? It's because you're using your interaction too soon. I think this is kind of one of the hardest lessons to learn. There are a lot of spells in cEDH that are very scary. And when you see them hit the stack and priority comes around to you and you've got two counter spells or, some form of interaction in your hand that will stop whatever this person's doing, there's always a temptation to just be like, all right, I got to fire this off. This is scary. But there's a difference in between scary spells resolving and you losing the game. And especially as we seem to be kind of, if you're playing in kind of a consistent meta, and even I don't play in tournaments or anything, but even I have like in playing pickup games and all that type of stuff, I've noticed more and more people are playing these kind of decks that we're playing a little bit less interaction right now because we're just trying to win, right? Making our opponents have it because they might not have it. Winning the game is really good. It's especially if you are playing less interaction as your opponents are maybe playing less interaction. It is very more and more so important to use your interaction on the things that really matter. We kind of talked about this in here, like when to break the rules in cEDH when we were talking about cEDH heuristics. There's kind of always the heuristic of counter the thing that the tutor gets, not the tutor, right? And I think that holds true here too. Like there's a lot of times where people are tempted to counter the tutor when you're probably not losing to the tutor unless you have other revealed information of like, okay, they already have all the stuff they have in hand. This is going and getting a silence. Just counter the tutor. Don't even give the chance of the silence coming in resolving or whatever. Just get rid of the tutor. Don't even let them bother with it. But is a spell that is hitting the stack, will it directly make you lose the game? Rhystic Study? That will probably make you directly lose the game. You should counter it. Mystical Aura? Maybe. Not as much. A random tutor? No. Esper Sentinel? No. There's a lot of scary spells out there. Even Ad Nauseam. You should counter Ad Nauseam. You lose the game Ad Nauseam.
Ad Nauseam's the classic example.
Ad Nauseam is the classic example. Underworld Breach, yeah, you're going to lose the game, especially if they like already have an LED on board. So, jam games, learn the spells that you absolutely always need to counter and learn what spells, no matter how scary they are probably fine to just let go.
And this is a really hard one because I can't tell you the amount of times people will spit out those heuristics whenever they lose a game. Told you not to feed the Rhystic Study. I told you not to feed the Esper Sentinel. I told you to counter that. Wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have a Rhystic on board? Oh, look at that. So-and-so fed this and that person won. Who would have known? And of course you can say that with 100% information of the game now that the game's over. But there are times when that's not always the case. And you can't just say, oh, every Mystic Remora I ever see, I'm just going to counter it immediately. And then that person, wins turn 2 or turn 3 with Thassa's Oracle that they just had in their hand to begin with. And there was no way of knowing whether or not Rhystic Study had it. Oh, but they could draw an interaction, and we could get into Rhystic Study arguments all day long. But at the end of the day, it's true. You should really spend it on what truly matters. And the trappings that you'll get into this is that you'll listen to other, game theory and magic theory and leveling up magic and stuff like that. And you'll hear these things that start to bubble to the surface, and that's the person who uses their resources the most efficiently will win more games of Magic. Basically, what that translates into when you first listen to that is that you should be tapping out every single turn. Whether it's tapping out to play to advance your board state or tapping out to ensure that you're interacting. So a classic example of this trapping is you're like, I'm going to leave up open 1 blue, and then it gets around right before your turn and somebody is, casting some arbitrary spell like a tutor, and you're like, I need to use all my resources in order to get farther in this game, so I'm going to burn my Swan Song right now. And that's actually not correct, because a Swan Song can counter a Breach. A Swan Song can counter a Rhystic later on. Swan Song can counter an Ad Nauseam, but you're saving it on a demonic tutor and they're going to pass the turn or something to that effect. You're so trapped in that concept that I have to use this mana or I'm not utilizing my resources and therefore I'm not using the game, that you're burning your interaction before you should be. You're burning it too soon. We actually have a classic example of this. In the recent Mox Masters on the finals, somebody stifled a turn 1 fetch land. So this caused a lot of discussion online about whether or not that was the right play. We even did a Twitter question online, and
it popped off a little bit.
It popped off a little bit.
People have opinions about this for sure.
Yep. A lot of opinions. Some say, 1 mana Stone Rain at instant speed sounds pretty good, or other people like, I would have saved that for something that actually is game winning, like a Thassa's Oracle trigger on the stack or something like that. And there's all these different schools of thought. And this is some of these trappings that we're talking about. You're burning your interaction simply because you have it in your hand. I'm going to use this Swords to Plowshares on a construct token in a 40 life 4-player format isn't the best call. Using it on something that is more threatening to you is the best move. And these are some of the things that you want to try and think about when you're trying to figure out what you should interact with.
Yeah, exactly. I agree, Ryan. These are the very hard things. This is like the funny thing about these kind of episodes, right? Like we have our level up series and we have like this episode where we're like, how can you get better at cEDH games? And we spend a lot of time being like, this is very difficult, but yeah, exactly. That's the hard part about cEDH. Gotta learn a lot. You gotta play a lot. There's always a lot to remember. Everything is complicated.
Yes, it is.
Everything is complicated. So, especially as your interaction becomes in shorter and shorter supply, be sure you are using it at the time when it is most impactful. Unless you are playing Nimrus and just want to trigger Nimrus all the time, make sure you aren't just jamming just because you can jam, just because you have the mana to jam. That's kind of our first half of our thing here. And we actually only have like one more major topic to discuss, but I'm sure we can talk about it for a while. So we are going to take a really quick break and then we will be right back.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Card Conduit. Do you have extra cards lying around that you don't use? Want to buy or trade for some extra cards but don't know how to maximize the value? Then you should try out Card Conduit. Card Conduit is the best service when it comes to selling your extra cards. Don't waste hours trying to find the best buy list price for your cards online. Simply send them to Card Conduit and let them take care of the rest. I've used Card Conduit multiple times already. I always use them to get the best value of my extra cards. I get fair prices for my cards and they save me tons of time. They have 3 main services. Their standard service lets you send them unsorted cards of any value. They will sort, grade, and give you the best buy list price for your cards. Their curated service is similar. Send them your unsorted cards worth over $1 in value. They will charge half of the fee of the standard service and charge no fee per card. Their new sorted service is a great value as well. Choose cards in advance with their selection tool, send them sorted to Card Conduit, and they will grade and buy list them automatically. Save yourself the time of having to send to multiple sites and let Card Conduit do it instead. Their fee is only 2% with no fee per card. They give you the best price for your cards. They work with competitive buy listing partners, including ones not open to the public. Users get an average of 19% more for their collection than they would have from a major retail buy list, even with Card Conduit's fees. Card Conduit also optimizes buy listing for card condition as well. Since vendors have different penalties for wear and tear, Card Conduit will find the best buy list price against the specific condition of a card. So give Card Conduit a try today. If you sign up with my link in the show notes or the description, or use the promo code POWER, you'll also get 10% off their fees when you use their service. A big thanks to Card Conduit for sponsoring today's podcast.
And welcome back. Why are you losing cEDH games? Ryan and I are still here to tell you. And let me tell you, the number one reason that you're losing cEDH games is unfortunately because you are playing you're playing a bad deck. I'm sorry.
Deck.
I'm sorry. You're playing a bad deck. Look, we get it. We play a lot of bad decks. Bad decks are fun. All cEDH decks are fun. But if you want to win a lot of cEDH games, if you're coming here and saying, I would like to win more cEDH games, not I'm trying to have a great time with my friends. Cool. That's awesome. That's 95% of the way that I play cEDH.
Mm-hmm.
If you are sitting down and wanting to say, I specifically would like to win more cEDH games, probably if you are playing a like 2-color, 1-color, or even specific color combination 3-color cEDH deck, or specific 4-color cEDH decks, or specific 5-color cEDH decks, probably one of the best things you can do to immediately up your win rate is swapping cEDH decks. Sometimes a change is just in order. This is kind of the way that Magic the Gathering has always worked, right? EDH is kind of the exception to the rule, where in a lot of EDH games, you just are kind of jamming a deck. You're just trying to have fun. You're trying to have a good time. And your deck power does not matter all that much as long as you're able to like enjoy yourself. And so are the other people at the table. And a lot of this attitude, for good reason, has transferred over to the cEDH community. You know, a lot of people come from the EDH background. A lot of people do kind of just play EDH as very powerful cEDH, myself included. If I'm not at a tournament, I'm just jamming. I'm just having fun. I'm vibing. And I'm playing bad decks like Rashmi. But that's the thing. I haven't played Rashmi in a long time because I got tired of having a 0% win rate on my favorite deck. And instead I started playing other more powerful decks. And sometimes that just has to happen. And that's just kind of how Magic works. There will always be better decks. There will always be a best deck. There will always be a deck you should be playing. There might be meta buster decks like that Nimrus deck that we mentioned earlier. That was a meta buster deck and a half from Mox Masters. You look at the card selections of that thing and oh boy, they thought about what they were going to play. But we get it. The decks you like are fun, but they might just be bad. If you want to up your win percent, a couple games messing around with the cards that are just like piles of the most powerful things you can do will probably help you out a lot. You know, Rograk Silas, you know, Rog Sai, Blue Farm, you know, Timna Crom, Najila, especially, you know, even, or like 3-color, you're a real 3-color person, don't want to play 4 or 5 colors. Dargo Thrasios is really good at winning Magic the Gathering games. So there's a very real world where, if you just want to stop losing cEDH games and you want to stop now, swap to like one of 10 decks instead of the deck you are playing, and your win rate will spike.
And let's put a caveat on this. First of all,
all my caveats weren't enough anymore. Caveats I already made weren't enough, Ryan.
We need at least 5 more caveats. So 10 caveats wasn't enough. We're aiming for 15 caveats.
15
here.
At least. All right, sure,
at least
sure.
15 caveats in here. We're not saying that you're not allowed to play whatever you want. We're saying that sometimes transferring over these concepts from casual to cEDH don't always go for one for one. We know that cEDH is EDH, and it's just one more way to enjoy this game. We also know that cEDH is a much different animal than casual EDH is, and where you can really allow your self-expression to come forth, and your playstyle and your personality is so much more heavily tied to EDH and Commander than it is to more of the CDH side, it's hard to let that stuff go. It's hard for you to say, but I'm so big into Aristocrats decks and I really want to make it work for cEDH. And then you try and you try and you try, and it just doesn't get there. It's because the Aristocrat strategy you're trying to force to work just doesn't work. This is nothing personal against you. It's nothing to do with your play style. And it's sometimes some strategies aren't able to hold their own against what the meta is in cEDH. That's really what it boils down to. And there's nothing that says that you can't still do it and still have fun. But if you're frustrated because you're not winning more games, you need to take a long, hard being the key word here, look at your deck and say, am I really trying to push this boulder uphill, and is it a lot heavier than it needs to be? And sometimes that answer when you're playing certain decks is yes. If you're really looking to win, to try and win more games, sometimes you just need to have better tools to accomplish that job. And sometimes your deck just isn't there. Trust me, take it from somebody who loves playing bad decks. I'm very aware.
This is a pair of bad deck aficionados over here. The best deck I play is Teamer Pirates, which is granted a pretty good deck, but it also just like loses to a stiff breeze. So
yeah, we're not theory crafting here. We're speaking from experience.
Do you know how many Nagilas? Do you know how many Nagilas I've cast in my life?
I've never even
way less than I should have. Way less than I should have. That's for sure. But yeah, look, if you want to start winning cEDH games, I'm just telling you,
win more.
Yeah, winning more cEDH games, and it doesn't even have to be. It doesn't even have to be like. It doesn't even have to be. I am picking up this deck and it is all that I play now. I think in addition to the decks just being more powerful, I think they can do a much better. They can do a much better job of helping you learn some of the other lessons that we talked about. Even just from the perspective of playing against people who are playing these decks, by playing the deck, you learn more about the interaction points. You learn more about how this opponent playing an Nagila deck that you're playing against. If you're playing an Nagila deck, you might learn more about how useful or not useful they may be as an ally for you in these kind of scenarios we were talking about earlier. So playing a better quote unquote cEDH deck, or maybe a more meta quote unquote cEDH deck, can go a very far way towards helping you learn other lessons besides just upping the raw power of the cards you're registering for a cEDH game.
Yep. All right. This is our last topic, and I think it's our most important topic. It's our most important pick for these lessons. And that is, in our opinion, you're not having fun. This, I think, is the most important one. Why are you losing cEDH games? Because you're not having fun. Cal, talk to us a little bit about this.
All right. So kind of like I was hedging over and over again in the last topic, playing a bad deck. A lot of the people who do come to play cEDH in the first place are coming to it because it is a way that they enjoy playing Magic the Gathering. You know, they maybe enjoyed playing EDH for a very long time, and now they just wanted to power up, and they've ended up playing cEDH. Maybe they were looking for a more casual way to play the game beyond the more competitive ways of playing the game, and normal EDH didn't do it for them, so they ended up playing cEDH. There's a lot of ways that people come to cEDH, and many of those ways are based in having fun. And if you're not having fun, if you're just miserable all the time, just like forcing yourself to play this game for some reason, which I think this is a lesson that a lot of people who play Magic the Gathering overall could probably stand to learn. You're not gonna do well. You're not gonna learn. You're not gonna improve. You're not gonna have the bandwidth to look for new things or new ways to up your game. If you're not having fun, you're not going to get better at playing Magic the Gathering. I think it was, there's been the tweet going around Magic Twitter recently, which is good old Mason Clark, who is an excellent grinder, great coach, et cetera, very good Magic the Gathering player. He did like the classic, like, oh, give us your hot take type of thing, and it caught on. But like his original take on there, he was like, I'll go first. And it was like, I think we would all like Magic the Gathering a lot more and like basically like be better at it if we all played less Magic the Gathering. And I think that would be true. I followed up and I was like, yeah, my hot take is that everyone who plays Magic the Gathering desperately needs a second hobby, which is like pretty much the exact same thing that he said. Because if Magic is the only thing you're doing, and Magic is all encompassing in your life, and you start losing like cEDH games and you're not having fun with it anymore, you're gonna keep losing cEDH games. There's losing streaks are statistical, right? It's normal. We have a very, very old episode of the podcast that is very, very good with Cam from the Lab Men, the good old Lab Maniacs, for you cEDH old heads out there, where we discuss some of that if you want to get a little more in depth in it. I'm sure Ryan will go a little more in depth in it in a minute. Anyways, but these losing streaks are statistical, and if like cEDH is your only hobby and you're not having fun because you're losing a lot of games, you're not going to start winning a lot of games all of a sudden either. Let me tell you, the more miserable you get playing Magic the Gathering, the more tilted you get, especially if it's like this is just a gaming thing in general, right? If you are not having fun, you will lose more games than you would otherwise. If you can't like fix that mindset, if you can't find a way to have fun while playing Magic the Gathering, you will not be improving. You will not be having a great time, so on and so forth. You're just wasting time. What are you doing playing a game and not having fun and not improving and not being able to focus and so on and so forth? Like, what are you doing? If you're not having fun, that's why you're losing cEDH games. And you're losing at life too, maybe. I don't know. Ryan, stop me from talking.
I want to make something very, very clear here. Winning.
The views of Callahan do not
reflect those of Flaming Tower as a whole. Basically, it's okay that winning is part of having fun. A lot of casual Commander almost made that bad. Like they've almost put a stink on that. Oh, I'm not here to win. I'm here to have fun. Like those two are mutually exclusive. And as you play cEDH, you realize those aren't mutually exclusive, and you're not a bad person for having fun by winning or trying to win. Like I said, casual has really put a stink on that. And I think that's a real disservice to a lot of people. I'm not going to get on some high horse or anything like that right now. That's not what we're talking about. But really what it boils down to is exactly what you said, Cal. It's if you're not enjoying yourself, you're going to find yourself getting more frustrated. And when you get more frustrated, you get more tilted and more salty. And people don't like playing with you as much, which changes the mood of the table and the tone of the table, because you're losing sight of why you're doing this. You're trying to make a living on cEDH. That's not going to happen. That's never going to be a thing if you're trying to grind tournaments to make a living. That's never going to be a reality, at least not in the next few years, at least. And even then, you're not going to be driving a Bentley. That's for sure. You need to not lose sight of why you're doing this to begin with. And the moment you do, you'll find yourself losing a lot. And that's because of the tone and the attitude you're bringing to the table. Make sure that if you're purposefully and deliberately going through and trying to improve, that you're not losing sight of why you're doing this to begin with. That's really what it boils down to.
And I think there's kind of a caveat for what I was saying too, which
caveat 16.
Look, further clarification. There are sometimes, if you are focused on getting better at Magic the Gathering, you do kind of just have to grind it through and not have the most fun possible. I think what we're talking about here is more of like a consistent pattern. If interacting with Magic the Gathering makes you miserable, if interacting with cEDH makes you sad, if just jamming cEDH games over and over and over and over again, like I know a lot of people do, is not bringing you enjoyment, you are not improving. You are making your day worse. You're probably making your opponent's days worse. And you're probably not getting better at Magic the Gathering because you're too busy being like miserable, right? Mm-hmm. So take a break, take a breath, have a good time doing something else. Go play Final Fantasy 16 or whatever the kids are doing these days. I don't know. Final Fantasy 14.
I think they're on Diablo 4 and Tears of the Kingdom still right now.
All right. I can't keep up. I'm too busy making content all day long, Ryan. Come on.
Same here. And to piggyback on the losing streak part of what you said earlier, losing streaks are statistical. So sometimes if you find yourself at a losing streak and you're starting to get frustrated because you're in that losing streak, understand that this is just part of the game. Sometimes you're just going to lose a lot. And we have a podcast episode on that where over the course of 100 games, you're actually going to find yourself losing 10 plus in a row.
Yep.
And that's very demotivating. But armed with the knowledge, knowing that's going to happen will help you push through that losing streak.
Yep.
I highly recommend you check out that podcast topic because it was a level up moment for me knowing that. Because at the time of recording that, this was 2 years ago at the point, I was actually going through a losing streak.
Yep.
And I was starting to hate it. I'm like, I suck at this game. This deck is bad. I need to do something else. Something's going on. I'm just not making it work. And then they said, look, it's statistically possible for you to lose 10 plus games in a row. I forget the exact number, but it was a high number. It wasn't like
regardless,
4.
even if you're like playing at your highest level and are playing a good deck and stuff, it's just statistical that sometimes that'll just get you.
Yeah. And this is really tough, especially like if you just happen to hit your losing streak right as you're trying to play a hot deck or you're trying to learn something new or you're trying to do something like this. You're like trying to apply these topics and that statistic happens to hit you at that time. That's really frustrating. But armed with that knowledge, you can say, this is just a losing streak. I'm going to push through this. And then you're going to be able to make it through that. So knowing that will make sure that it will help you absolve some of your frustration, make sure you're still doing this for the right reasons, that you're not losing sight of it, and still, at the end of the day, having a great time playing cEDH.
I entirely agree, Ryan. And I think that about wraps up everything that we have to say about why do I keep losing cEDH games? An important lesson for Ryan and I, obviously, and hopefully something that you benefited from as well. Do you find yourself losing a lot of cEDH games? Do you find yourself making the mistakes we talked about today? Maybe you should work on it. I don't know. I know I still make all these mistakes all the time, and I've been purposely trying to improve at cEDH for years now. What do you think of our tips and tricks? Did we miss anything? Let us know. We're on Twitter. We're not on, I was going to say we're on Reddit, but that's objectively incorrect.
Not subjectively incorrect. It's objectively
correct. Please, Reddit, cringe. Cal's views do not reflect do
not reflect Playing with Power as a whole.
If you like our podcast, make sure to give us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast aggregator. You'd be surprised how much it helps other people find us. You can also find Ryan and I and the rest of the Playing with Power team on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, and more. All links are in the episode notes. Well, that wraps it up for this episode of the podcast. Tune in next time when we talk more about our favorite format and our favorite game, Magic the Gathering. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and we will see you next time.